Can black people be racist? Let's talk about it.
Can black people be racist? Let's talk about it.
So, can black people be racist? This is something I've been wanting to talk about.
It genuinely gives zero about your guys' feelings, and I will come on here and say all the uncomfortable truths that everybody knows is true, but absolutely nobody will talk about. Black people are the most racist individuals that there is in 2025. As a white person, I certainly can't go to a black community and feel safe. But when they come to white communities, it's like they're in Disneyland. I used to be an addict, so every time I'd go down to Newark, I would have to make sure I was strapped. I don't think they have to feel the same way about going out in a white community. Matter of fact, they can come here and say whatever they want. They can call me white boy this, white boy that, white whatever the and I'm just simply not going to comply with the double standard. I genuinely do not care one bit about your guys' feelings, and I'll tell you the truth. And the truth is, in 2025, white kids are being raised to be accepting individuals, and it's not the other way around, and everybody knows that.
I think black people are way more racist towards white people in this country than the other way around.
Now they are. Today, because when...
And America, by the way.
Oh, yes, I'm saying, because if you're talking about now, today, in terms of like what I've seen on the internet and what I've seen with these DEI roles in industries and businesses, all of a sudden, when white people are going, I can't apply for that job.
That's racist in itself,
but
the whole DEI movement.
It is, but white people are going, I can't apply for that job.
As black people, we're more racist than white people.
And why'd you say that?
Because I think at one point we need to stop acting like victims and start being more proud of ourselves than being victims from the past.
As far as being called a racist, I can't be a racist. Racism is a group system of power and privilege that is exercised and implemented by one group that has the ability to disenfranchise the other. In order for me to be racist, black people have to be so organized and in control of institutions that we can disadvantage white people or other non-black people whenever we feel like it. You don't own any institutions. I don't own any institutions. How can I be racist? Racism is systemic. It is systemic bias. It is a systemic program implemented by an entire people against another entire people. Black people are not organized, number one, and we don't own any institutions, number two, so there's no way I can be racist. A black person can have a prejudiced attitude, which I would consider intelligence. We've been dealing with white folks for over 500 years. If you don't exercise your prejudice in dealing with white folks, it could cost you your life. So to be prejudiced as an African, I think, is to be intelligent, because I'm not going amongst white folks and not use my history and study of them to benefit my interaction with them. It would be ridiculous not to. You see, so you can be prejudiced. You can have an emotional or intellectual bias towards white folk, but you cannot disadvantage those white folks. On the flip side, if a white person does not like you, they can get you fired from your job. They can get you locked up. They can get you killed by the police. Even a poor white person has connections to rich white people that rich black people don't even have. So even a poor white person has much more social and systematic power than you ever could. Black people cannot be racist. And it's amazing that we're always getting charged with being a racist when we have never systematically enslaved white folks. We have never systematically dehumanized white folks. We have never systematically Jim Crowed white folks. We have never systematically committed genocide against white people. But yet we're always being accused of being a racist. That's what you call political projection. I'm going to put onto you what is really an accurate descriptor of me, so I can trap you up and distract you in having to defend and explain yourself all the time while I continue to implement my agenda, which is why I don't get into arguments about whether I'm a racist or a homophobe. I don't pay it no mind, because that's another tactic to keep me caught up in defending myself. Yep. So I never get back to my work. I'm unapologetic. So whatever people feel, they can feel it. I got a job to do.
All right. Black people cannot be racist. I'm tired of seeing y'all argue about it. My name is Brother Legend, and I'm here to raise your consciousness. According to Google, the definition of racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. And I'm going to need us to focus in and listen up to the word on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group. I don't know who needs to hear this, but that black person that bullied you in high school, or that black person that was mean to you, was not doing that on the basis of your membership to a certain group. It wasn't because they saw your skin and felt superior and thought of you as inferior. And then a lot of y'all like to try to bring up individual racism. We live in an environment that is hostile towards blackness and black people. The kids of Columbus do not get to dictate how black people react to that hostility. Retaliation on the basis of hostility is not the same thing as antagonism on the basis of race. And nobody getting bullied in school should be brought up in conversations about redlining, medical apartheid, mass incarceration, and so on. Racism requires a systemic belief of superiority within a group. Two people alone cannot go to war. If two men fight each other, that is just a fight. But if two men with uniforms on were to fight each other and their countries were at war, that's a war. Because those actions would be considered on behalf of the group. Because there is no systemic ideology of black people oppressing non-black people, there is no systemic racism within our community. So even if a black person were mean to another non-black person on the basis of race, they wouldn't be acting on behalf of the group. However, other groups have controlled, created, and even codified into law how they feel about black people. So when they act as an individual, they are acting on behalf of their group. That is racism.
Hello, what's up, good people? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back for another video. Now, we have a very interesting conversation in this video, and we are going to start it with this question. Can black people really be racist? Can black people be racist? But before we answer this question too fast, maybe let's go back and ask ourselves some questions that matter the most. What is racism? Is it just a dislike? Is it just a biases? Is it just bad attitude? Or is racism something bigger than emotion, something bigger than, our feelings? Because if racism is simply prejudice, then yes, anyone can actually be racist because anyone can actually hold a prejudice. Anyone can actually be biased in one way or another. But if racism is power, if racism is structure, if racism is control, then maybe we need to stop playing with words and ask the most important questions like who controls the power, who builds the system, and who benefits when race is in effect, or when race is at play, or when race is weaponized. And before we get too emotional about this, maybe we need to think, are we defining racism exactly, or are we just defending positions? So that is what I want us to discuss and try to learn about in this video. Be sure to watch it till the end, and do share with me what you think, your opinions, your take about this in the comment section below after watching this video, and give this video a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing to this channel. So let's watch these videos and I'll be back with my really good analysis of this.
I think black people are way more racist towards white people in this country than the other way around.
Now they are. Today, because when...
This is Joey Barton, a former football manager who has started this podcast called Common Sense, but really it should be renamed No Sense. Whenever white people make the statement that black people or people of colour are racist, it just gets under my skin because it shows a complete lack of understanding of what racism is and how it operates. People of colour in the UK, by definition, cannot be racist. Yes, a person of colour can be prejudiced against another race, religion, sexuality, gender, but the consequences of that prejudice is only felt by the other individual. However, racism is much more complex. Racism is prejudice plus power, the key word here being power. And the majority white population in the UK hold the most power. We can visibly see this in all the top boardrooms of the most powerful decision makers in the UK. They are all primarily white. So when a white person is racist, they are sustaining and perpetuating a system that disadvantages people of colour in all the institutions. That's the justice system, healthcare, education, housing, employment. So Joey Barton, go and do your homework before you come out with statements like that.
No black person can be a racist. It is impossible in theory and practice for a black person to be a racist in America. And quit letting people call you a racist because you speak up for your own people. Where do you have enough power and wealth and resources to tell white folk who they can marry, where they can live, and what businesses they can own and control? No black person can do that. This is what Dr. Answer, we got with Malcolm X and Farrakhan, what they're racist. No, they weren't racist. Any black person that speaks out in behalf of his own people is not a racist. He is reacting to white racism. All a black person can do is to react to white racism. He cannot be a racist. That's why I get very concerned. I hear people talking about, well, Dr. Answer, we got reverse racism. How you get reverse? Well, he's talking bad about us. He's supposed to. He's reacting to what you're doing to him. You're beating a man to death and talking about, well, he doesn't want me to beat him anymore. He's a real racist. Well, it's a reverse discrimination. You cannot have reverse discrimination unless you got forward discrimination. If I pull a car into a garage, and park the car on your foot, and while the car is in forward gear, and I start screaming in pain, say, get it off my foot. They said, well, Dr. Answer, for me to put it in reverse and back it up, that's reverse back up, but that's reverse discrimination. Or it's best for us to leave it where it is on your foot. It's stupid stuff. But black folk go along with it, you see? Hell, if it's on your foot, you get it off. I don't care what you call it, but my people are scared. I might as well let it stay on there, child. It'll be okay. God will make a way.
I am trying to get black people to understand that black people can be racist. If you are actively working in service of white supremacy, you are being racist. Black people do not want to accept this. I'll keep coming in my comments and saying black people don't have enough power to be racist. Let's try this another way. Y'all remember this movie? Where this man was the embodiment of white supremacy. He is racism. Okay. But his loyal nigga does everything he can to perpetuate his specific supremacy in that plantation and white supremacy in general. He protects Candy and helps keep the other blacks down. He defends Candy even after he's dead. He surely gains power from his proximity to Candy. He's a willing and happy, enthusiastic soldier for white supremacy. How is this character not racist? How, Sway? This is the fictional embodiment of anti-black racism. Not only does he believe in his core that blacks are lesser than whites, but he is working to perpetuate white supremacy every single day. If you work in service of white supremacy, you are being racist.
Okay, so it's very apparent that some white people don't understand the definition of racism. So I'm going to have my friend Morgan break it down for you.
My friend posted a question on Facebook, can black people be racist? And there were a lot of people saying, well, yeah, black people can be racist. This one time, this black person said this to me. And then I hopped on there and I said, no, racism belongs to white people. We created it for ourselves so that we could benefit from it. And I broke it down and I said, this is the math equation that I use for my 6th grade students. We put it on the wall, on the board. They write it down in their notebooks. Power plus privilege plus prejudice equals racism. And black people can have prejudice. Black people can have power for, like, I'm thinking like political power. But then at the end of the day, whether you have prejudice and power, there's still that privilege aspect that's lacking.
I gotta be objective. I gotta call a spade a spade. And I think that there is some nuance here. So let's go ahead and get the pleasantries out of the way. Of course, there are some still racist white people. Of course, there are racist black people. Of course, there are some white people that raise their children to be a little bit more demonic. And of course, there are black people to raise their children to be a little bit more demonic. So nobody is a monolith. And when we talk about the majority, not the minority. So now that we got the pleasantries out of the way, let's ask ourselves this question. Is it the truth? Is it the truth and why? And I think that the why is what we then explore after we evaluate if it's the truth. And from my perspective, as a black person that, you know, understand that we have to be a part of the Democrat plantation and, you know, that the label, because I mean, be honest with you, like I get called out of my name because I'm objective enough to actually see the truth from what it is. And I divest myself from the idea that all white people are bad. or all Jewish people are bad, or all this is bad. And so when we then get rid of that mentality, you start to see it. The veil is lifted from your eyes. And if you go into some of these households and you talk amongst these circles, and white people are now being able to see it for themselves because racist black people feel comfortable saying whatever it is that they want to say. And when he even described the whole idea of they can say white boy this, white boy that, if you say black boy this, black boy that as a white person, you are 1000% going to be labeled as racist. White people are labeled as racist before they ever even open up their mouth. If black people think you stare at them wrong, you racist. If you didn't get the job, you racist. If you are called out on your behavior on a Carnival cruise ship, oh, I can't believe they don't want the black dollar. Like, you will never hear openly people say, I can't believe they don't want the white dollar. You know what I'm saying? And so the litmus test is always, if you don't feel comfortable with somebody doing to you what you...
Y'all making me pull up the receipts. Racism is defined as a power structure that allows one group to put a system in place where they use their race to directly discriminate against people of different races based on the belief that their own race is superior. It has been around since the transatlantic slave trade, where the idea of one race being superior to another became instituted in order to excuse the enslavement of a group of people based solely off the color of their skin. Racism is nothing new in America, but too much of the conversation mistakes being prejudice to being racist. Racism can only exist when one group has power and influence over another. But that's just a random site. That's just a random, anyone could have written that. Okay. So this is from CNN. Go ahead and read that real quick. Pause, read. And then I want to look at both sides. So here's the next thing to pause on. Ibram X. Kennedy, who does a lot of anti-racist work, says no. So still highly debated.
First of all, let's define racism. Well, the definition of racism is belief that a particular race is inferior or superior to another race, resulting in discrimination, prejudice, or antagonism against people just based off their race. Now, systematic racism is when institutions or societies enforce it. So that's your clear definitions, no excuses. Okay, so let's get this straight. Racism is prejudice plus power. Systematic racism is when the institutions enforce it. But here's the thing. Anyone displaying hate, discrimination, or prejudice just off the basis of race, that is 110% racist. Yes, I know you lot don't want to hear it, but it's racist. Doesn't matter who you are. I've noticed that this is something that people that say black people can't be racist. Yes, you can be racist. Get the words correct and get the understanding of something correct. It will be very difficult for black people to actually display systematic racism because we're not in a black country. However, it's a possibility if you're in another country, a more black dominated country, it's possible. So before anybody again says black people can't be racist, just check the definition. If your actions and your words are matching it, then you are a racist.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't get numerous comments on my anti-racism education videos that say, black people can be racist too. Okay, I have an entire episode of my Anti-Racism Schools in Session podcast entitled, Is Reverse Racism Real? I would recommend that you go watch that. Watch the entire episode. Watch it on YouTube, listen to it wherever you listen to your podcast to get a deeper understanding of this fallacy. Okay, I'm not going to repeat myself again in this video because I've already answered that question. But what I do want to address is this. Saying black people can be racist too does not erase your internalized anti-black racism as a white person, nor does it eradicate the trauma, violence, harm, and systemic and negative outcomes that black people unfairly, disproportionately endure and experience every day due to the white people who uphold the lie of white supremacy. It does not absolve you from your complicity and your active or passive participation in white supremacy culture and anti-black racism. It does nothing. It changes nothing. It means nothing. So why are you so committed to shifting the focus off of you and your complicity and your responsibility for the white supremacist, anti-black, and systemic racism of today, not the past, of today? Don't answer. It's a rhetorical question. I already know the answer. So for those of you who are committed to unlearning the racism you've been taught and becoming an active part of the solution instead of a passive part of the problem, I invite you to join my 5-day challenge today. Link in my bio.
All right. So this is my take. First of all, holding a bias is not the core problem. You see, being biased is like holding an opinion. And people holding opinions, different opinions, people are always biased. And because people are opinionated then. And let's get this clear. Human beings are naturally biased. Everybody, black people, white people, Asians, Arabs, anyone can actually be biased. Biases is part of human experience. It is shaped by history, by society, by culture, by exposure, by trauma. And yes, prejudice in itself is wrong, but prejudice alone is not the biggest threat to society, really. If someone hates me from a distance, but does not affect my life in the process, well, I don't care about that. That's not going to be a problem to me. Because someone disliking you privately does not automatically control how you live your life. For example, how you get your opportunities. The real danger begins when now biases or prejudice connects, with or to power. Now, this leads us to my, second part of this analysis, where now biases enters structure or enters institutions. So racism actually becomes lethal when, it becomes structural, when it shapes, hiring systems, housing, policing, courts, banks, media narratives, education system and school, and even religion. Now that becomes a problem. But just holding a prejudice privately without affecting my life, but it doesn't affect me. But now when it comes to the fact that it shapes all of the things I have listed, like housing, like policing, like government, like school, institution, like banks, the justice system, now that is the problem. So because now at that point it's no longer just bad behavior. You holding your bad behavior and not having it not affect other people is not a societal problem that big, So when it gets more than, it's beyond your personal space, now that is architectural, And historically, especially in places like the United States, for example, the architecture or the structure was built under white dominance. And that's why I can confidently say that slavery wasn't bias, and Jim Crow wasn't bias. Redlining wasn't and isn't a bias. It is organized power, And so if racism is prejudice plus institutional power, we have to ask them, who controls the institutions? Who has, the control levers to, to the power? So now let's answer this directly. Can black people hold a prejudice? Yes. Can black people stereotype other people, black or white or yellow or whatever? Yes. Can black people behave unfairly? Yes. But can black people enforce a racial hierarchy through systems that actually they do not control? See, that's a different question altogether, because racism in its most dangerous form is not about emotions. It's not about people just holding stereotypes. It's not just about, people behaving unfairly. It is actually now enforcement, And globally, the dominant power structures have historically been white or white-led, And that doesn't mean racism is biologically white, something to understand really. So when people say racism is white supremacy, they're not talking about DNA. It's not in the DNA, but it is in the location, Where is power located? In most cases, power is generally controlled by, whiteness, And then there's another part to this, my analysis, and the uncomfortable truth. And can black individuals really participate in systems of racism? And remember, I'm trying to say here that black people don't really hold the power to be racist. institutionally and structurally, but then can they partake in the whole play? Yes, black people can actually be used against black people. So we have seen black politicians, for example, and black opinion leaders defend policies that disproportionately hurt black communities. We've seen black media personalities uphold narratives that serve the white power structure. And does that mean they created racism really as these black people who happen to be, you know, maybe they want to please the white power structure, maybe they want to gain something from it? No, they did not actually create it, but it proves something deeper, that systems don't care about your skin color, and that is the truth, you know. So racism isn't really about the skin color. It is about structure. It is about power. And so systems don't care about skin color. For example, we have seen under white supremacy, white people who end up being hurt by the white supremacy systems themselves. Take, for example, this. In America today, we've seen a lot of MAGA people coming out to say, this is not what we voted for, this is not what, and you know, white people, white, you know, Caucasian people who really were voting for the white man because that was their guy. And, you know, it turns out that their so-called guy has turned on them, and the policies being enacted by their guy and his government is hurting them. So really, systems don't care about how you look, your skin color, they care about who protects them. And sometimes power uses faces, actually, that make it hard to criticize. For example, using a black person to attack black people. I remember some months ago, there is this black guy from America who was actually being used to criticize Ibrahim Traore, for example, you know, the president of Burkina Faso, and black people were not happy with it. And they said, we know this script, using one of us, you know, to attack us. So sometimes power uses people and faces that make it hard to criticize. So it looks like it is one of our own. It is our own problem. And that's not new. That's actually strategy. Now, so maybe we are asking the wrong question. We've been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, can black people be racist? Maybe we should be asking, who has the power to turn prejudice into policy? Who has the power to turn biases into law? Or who really controls the power so that they can get to decide whose life becomes harder because of race? Because that is actually where racism basically lives, not in the feelings, not in people's emotions. It is in the systems. And until we are really honest about it, we'll keep arguing in circles, thinking, yes, black people can be racist, or black people can't be racist. You know, it's just a circle of argument that really has no end. Yeah, so really that's more like my take about it. I would really be interested to know what you think about this. If you agree, you can give this video a thumbs up. You can share it as well. And let me know what you think by leaving a comment in the comment section below. Consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll really, really appreciate.